Commander Raleen Voss stared at the undulating light pattern on her display, the blue-green waves pulsing with hypnotic regularity. Her four-fingered hand, covered in fine iridescent scales, tapped a nervous rhythm on the command console of the Helios Dawn. The exploration vessel hung in the darkness at the edge of forgotten space, where stars were sparse and civilizations sparser still. "Signal analysis complete, Commander," reported Ensign Tix, his voice tinged with the characteristic melodic inflection of the Lanari species. "It's definitely an SOS, ancient encoding pattern amplitude modulation over radio waves. Primitive, but unmistakable." Raleen's crest flattened against her skull, a sign of concentration among the Avixi. "Origin. Sol 3, Commander. Approximately 37 light-years from our position." The bridge fell silent. Sol 3. A name that appeared in old navigation charts, but hadn't been relevant to galactic Concord operations for centuries. Raleen accessed the database through her neural implant information, flickering before her inner eye. Sol 3. Also designated Earth by indigenous population. Class 5 Deathworld. Last survey 250 standard years ago. Determination unsuitable for contact due to extreme environmental hazards and aggressive native fauna. Follow-up survey scheduled for overdue by 73 years. "Someone missed their appointment," Raleen muttered, her voice carrying the dry, precise tone that had earned her a reputation for being coldly efficient. "Specialist Jarrell, what do we know about the indigenous civilization there?" The ship's xenologist, a willowy Silvani, with skin like polished mahogany, consulted her data terminal. "Very little, Commander. The preliminary survey was quite cursory. They noted pre-spaceflight technology, competitive social structures, and high resource consumption. The civilization was deemed unstable and likely to self-extinguish before achieving interstellar capabilities." Raleen's inner eyelids flickered in thought. "And yet here we are, receiving a distress signal from them. Curious." "The signal is buried deep in the background radiation," Tix added. "If we hadn't been conducting deep space silence tests, our filters would have eliminated it as noise. It's remarkable we detected it at all." "Or perhaps it was meant to be found eventually." Raleen said more to herself than her crew. She straightened her immaculately pressed uniform, a habit that surfaced whenever decisions weighed upon her. "How long has this signal been transmitting?" "Based on signal degradation, approximately 1843 standard years, Commander. Almost 2 millennia. A cry for help echoing across the void, long after those who sent it had likely perished." The thought stirred something uncomfortable in Raleen's typically ordered mind. "Assemble the senior staff in the command center. We need to discuss our options." 20 minutes later, Raleen faced her gathered officers around the holographic display table. The three-dimensional projection of the Sol system rotated slowly, the third planet, highlighted in soft blue. "The Concord exploratory directive is clear," stated First Officer Kellis, a stocky tyranny with metallic flecked skin. "Any distress signal must be investigated regardless of origin or age." "A directive written for contemporary emergencies," countered Security Chief Mavic. "Not fossil signals from potential deathworlds." "Nevertheless," Raleen interjected, "the legal and ethical framework is unambiguous. We must report this and recommend action." The staff meeting continued for another hour, possibilities debated and contingencies explored. In the end, Raleen knew there was only one acceptable course. She composed her report to Concord Command with meticulous precision, attaching all data on the signal and the forgotten world it came from. The response came 3 days later. The Helios Dawn was to proceed to Sol 3 at maximum sustainable speed. 3 additional vessels would rendezvous with them at the edge of the system: the medical ship, Mercy's Hand; the analytical vessel, Distant Scholar; and the escort frigate, Swift Guardian. Together, they would form a humanitarian response fleet under Raleen's command. As the Helios Dawn altered course and engaged its gravity-fold engines, Raleen stood alone in the observation dome. Stars streaked past as the ship accelerated each one, a sun that might harbor life, civilization stories untold. She had risen through the ranks of the Concord fleet, through discipline and adherence to protocol. This mission would test both. Computer retrieve historical imagery of Sol 3. The display shimmered, revealing a blue-green sphere, partially shrouded in white clouds. Magnify surface features. The image zoomed, showing vast oceans, sprawling continents, mountain ranges, and sprawling primitive settlements from centuries ago. Such a hospitable-looking world to be classified as a death world, she murmured. What makes you so dangerous, Earth? Little did she know she would soon find out. The journey to Sol took 17 days at maximum sustainable speed. During that time, Raleen immersed herself in studying everything available about Earth and its inhabitants, which was frustratingly little. The perfunctory survey from 250 years ago had been conducted from a distance with minimal sensor probes and no direct contact. The Concord's initial assessment had deemed the planet too hazardous for closer study due to extreme weather patterns, tectonic instability, aggressive biodiversity, and a dominant species showing alarming territorial tendencies. That species called themselves humans, bipedal mammals with remarkable adaptability and problem-solving capabilities. The preliminary report had noted their potential, but considered them unlikely to survive their own technological adolescence. A common enough story across the galaxy, promising species that destroyed themselves before reaching the stars. Yet, someone had sent that signal, and it continued broadcasting millennia later. As the ships of the humanitarian fleet dropped out of faster-than-light travel at the edge of the Sol system, Raleen felt the first stirrings of genuine unease. Something about this mission felt wrong. Not dangerous necessarily, but decidedly off-kilter. The signal they had detected was too perfect, too designed to be found. It lacked the desperate urgency of a true emergency beacon. Commander, we're receiving a data transmission from the distant Scholar, reported Communications Officer Naylan. Their preliminary analysis of the signal pattern. Raleen reviewed the incoming data, her crest rising in surprise. This encryption pattern, it's elegant. Too elegant for a simple distress call. Dr. Mahir Keel, the fleet's historical anthropologist aboard the distant Scholar, had appended a note. Signal characteristics suggest this may have been an experimental communication rather than a genuine distress call. Recommend caution. Maintain yellow alert status, Raleen ordered. Begin slow approach to Sol 3. Standard formation sensors at maximum sensitivity, but passive mode only. Let's not announce ourselves too boldly. The small fleet moved inward through the system, passing the outer gas giants with their swirling storms and myriad moons. They detected evidence of old mining operations on several satellites, further indication that the inhabitants of this system had progressed technologically since the last survey. As they approached the fourth planet, a rust-red world with thin atmosphere, Officer Naylan suddenly stiffened at his station. Commander, I'm detecting artificial satellites orbiting the fourth planet. Raleen moved swiftly to his side. Show me. The display revealed small, structural habitats nestled on the Martian surface, and a network of satellites providing communication relays. Primitive by Concord standards, but far beyond what the old survey had predicted. They've expanded beyond their homeworld, she murmured. Interesting. Commander, came the urgent voice of Sensor Officer Lita. I'm detecting powered objects moving from behind the solar primary. They appear to be ships. Dozens of them. Raleen returned to her command chair, tension coiling within her. Time to Earth orbit. 6 hours at current speed, Commander. Maintain course and speed. Open continuous channels to all fleet vessels. I want real-time tactical updates and analysis. She paused, then added, and encrypt all non-essential communications. Let's not be completely transparent just yet. As the hours passed, the picture grew clearer and more concerning. The inhabitants of Sol 3 had not merely survived, they had thrived. Sensor readings indicated a complex network of orbital platforms around Earth habitats, manufacturing centers, defense installations. And the ship's more than 50 vessels of varying sizes were now moving in a coordinated pattern that could only be described as a defensive formation. "They're positioning themselves between us and Earth," Security Chief Mavic observed. "Classic interdiction pattern." "Commander," Naylan called out, his voice tight with urgency. "We're being scanned. Multiple frequency bands, active targeting systems." Before Raleen could respond, the main communication screen activated. The face that appeared was bipedal mammalian, with dark skin and short-cropped hair. The being wore what was clearly a military uniform, adorned with insignia of rank. Its expression was stern, evaluating. "Attention, unidentified vessels. This is Captain Elena Rourke of the Earth Defense Force. You have entered sovereign human space without authorization. Identify yourselves and state your purpose immediately, or withdraw beyond the orbit of Jupiter. You have 5 minutes to comply." The bridge fell silent. First contact, or rather renewed contact, had been established. And it had come not with the traditional Concord greeting of peace and cooperation, but with a military ultimatum. Raleen took a moment to compose herself, then stepped forward into the visual pickup range. "This is Commander Raleen Voss of the Galactic Concord Humanitarian Fleet. We come in peace, responding to a distress signal originating from your planet. We mean no harm and request permission to approach and offer assistance if needed." The human captain's expression didn't change, but something flickered in her eyes. Surprise, perhaps, or suspicion. "Distress signal. Earth has issued no distress call." Captain Rourke looked off-screen, briefly, apparently consulting with someone outside the visual field. When she returned her attention to Raleen, her expression had hardened. "Our records indicate no previous contact with any organization calling itself the Galactic Concord. Explain yourself more thoroughly, Commander." Raleen felt as though she were suddenly navigating a plasma storm without shields. First contact protocols were explicit, but they assumed the contacted species was unaware of galactic civilization. These humans clearly had advanced space capabilities and a military presence that suggested they were not naive to the concept of threats from beyond. "Captain Rourke, the Galactic Concord is an alliance of spacefaring civilizations dedicated to peaceful exploration and mutual aid. Your world was surveyed briefly approximately 250 standard years ago, but was classified as hazardous and left to develop independently. We recently detected what appears to be an ancient SOS signal, broadcasting from your planet, dating back approximately 1,800 years. As per our protocols, we assembled this humanitarian mission to investigate and offer assistance." Rourke's eyes narrowed. "You surveyed us without contact, classified us on whose authority?" This was spiraling out of control. Raleen needed to diffuse the tension quickly. "Captain, perhaps we should—" "Commander," interrupted Sensor Officer Lita, forgetting protocol in her urgency. "The human vessels are activating weapon systems. Energy readings are spiking on multiple platforms." The human captain's voice turned cold. "Your vessels are scanning our defensive systems and fleet deployments. We consider this an act of aggression." "No," Raleen exclaimed, genuinely alarmed. "Those are standard navigational sensors. We mean no." "Withdraw beyond Jupiter's orbit immediately," Rourke commanded. "Any further approach will be considered hostile action. You have 30 minutes to comply." The communication ended abruptly. Raleen stood frozen for a moment, the situation unfolding in ways no first contact training had prepared her for. These humans were not primitive beings grateful for contact with an advanced civilization. They were a spacefaring military power that viewed the Concord ships as potential invaders. "Orders, Commander," First Officer Kellis prompted. Raleen made her decision. "Contact the distant scholar. I want Dr. Keel and his team to analyze everything we have on that signal. If it wasn't a genuine distress call, I need to know what it was, and why it's still transmitting after all this time. And our position, Commander? Hold here. Do not advance or retreat. Power down all active scanning systems, passive sensors only. And send a priority message to Concord Command. We need guidance on how to proceed with an independently developed spacefaring civilization that believes we are hostile." As her orders were carried out, Raleen returned to the observation window. The blue-green world of Earth hung in the distance, surrounded by the glittering lights of orbital structures and the ominous silhouettes of warships. She had come expecting to find a primitive world in need of rescue. Instead, she'd found a fortress armed and suspicious. What had gone so wrong? On the distant scholar, Dr. Mahir Keel worked feverishly with his team of analysts and linguists. The ancient signal that had brought them to this system was proving to be far more complex than initially assumed. Its apparent simplicity masked layers of information that only became visible when examining specific frequency patterns and modulation shifts. "It's not a distress call at all," he finally announced to his assembled team. "It's a test pattern, a deliberate broadcast designed to be detected and decoded by recipients with the right technology." "A test for what?" asked his assistant, a young Satari with translucent skin that rippled with electrical patterns, when she was excited as she was now. "For detecting extraterrestrial intelligence," Keel replied, studying the decrypted data. According to this embedded metadata, it was launched in the early 21st century of their calendar approximately 1,800 years ago. It was an experiment, a beacon sent into space to see if anyone would answer. "And we just did," the assistant murmured. "Indeed. Nearly 2 millennia late, but we answered." Keel's expression grew troubled. "We need to inform Commander Voss immediately. This entire mission is predicated on a fundamental misunderstanding." Back on the Helios Dawn, Raleen received Keel's report with growing dismay. Not a distress call, but a technological experiment from Earth's distant past. The humans had not been crying for help. They had been curious, reaching out to the stars with a question, "Is anyone there?" And the Concord, in its bureaucratic wisdom, had classified their world as too dangerous to contact, then eventually forgotten about them entirely. The scheduled follow-up survey, which might have revealed their rapid technological development, had never happened. "Negligence," Raleen said bitterly. "They were abandoned to develop in isolation because someone missed a scheduled check-in." Her ruminations were interrupted by an urgent call from the bridge. "Commander, multiple new contacts appearing from behind Earth's moon. We count at least 40 additional vessels heavily armed." Raleen rushed to the bridge, feeling the situation slipping further from her control. The tactical display showed the new arrivals' larger warships forming a second defensive shell around Earth. "They're deploying for combat," Security Chief Mavic said, gravely. "Standard envelopment pattern. They think we're the vanguard of an invasion force." Raleen had to admire the tactical acumen. These humans had clearly developed sophisticated space combat doctrine despite their isolation. Or perhaps because of it. "Open a channel to Captain Rourke," she ordered. "Priority signal." After tense moments, the human captain's face appeared once more on the screen. "Your time is up, Commander. Begin withdrawal immediately." "Captain Rourke, please listen," Raleen said, abandoning formality for urgent clarity. "We've discovered a critical misunderstanding. The signal we detected was not a current distress call. It was an ancient experimental broadcast from your planet's past, a test to detect extraterrestrial intelligence. We responded to it believing your people needed aid, but we now understand this is not the case." Rourke's expression remained skeptical, but she didn't immediately dismiss the explanation. "Even if that's true, it doesn't explain why your Concorde surveyed us without contact, then labeled us as dangerous and abandoned us." "You're right," Raleen admitted. "That was wrong. A bureaucratic failure for which I can only apologize. But I assure you, the Galactic Concorde means your world no harm. We are primarily explorers and diplomats, not conquerors." Captain Rourke seemed about to respond when she was distracted by something off-screen. Her expression changed from suspicion to alarm. Multiple unidentified vessels just emerged from FTL at the edge of the system. She reported no longer speaking directly to Raleen, but clearly allowing her to hear. They matched no known configuration, heavily armed, moving fast. Raleen felt a chill pass through her. Those aren't Concord ships. Captain, we should... The communication cut abruptly as the Helios Dawn rocked violently. "We're under attack!" Security Chief Mavic shouted. "Energy weapons fire from the new arrivals! Direct hit on our aft shield generator!" "Battle stations," Raleen commanded. "All personnel to emergency positions. Raise shields but do not return fire unless directly ordered." She turned to communications. "Re-establish contact with the human fleet. Now." The situation had deteriorated from diplomatic tension to outright combat in seconds. The tactical display showed the new arrivals, 15 vessels of unknown design, accelerating into the system and opening fire on both the Concord ships and the human defense fleet. When Captain Rourke's face appeared again on the view screen, she was shouting orders to her crew, her bridge filled with urgent activity. "Who are they?" Raleen demanded. "Unknown," Rourke replied tersely. "But they're targeting both our forces. Multiple impacts on our outer defense platforms." Raleen made a swift decision. "Captain, I propose an immediate ceasefire between our forces and temporary cooperation against this new threat. I'm transmitting our shield frequencies and weapon signatures to help your sensors distinguish us from the hostiles." It was a gesture of enormous trust, giving potential adversaries critical tactical data. But Raleen saw no alternative. If the human fleet and the Concord ships fought each other while under attack by an unknown force, both would likely be destroyed. Rourke hesitated only briefly before nodding. "Agreed. Sending our recognition codes now. My tactical officer will coordinate with yours." As the communication switched to a secure tactical channel, First Officer Kellis moved closer to Raleen's position. "Commander, do you think this might be the Meridian? The timing is suspicious." The Meridian Confluence, a shadowy coalition of species known for aggressive expansion and technological theft. They had been a thorn in the Concord side for centuries, striking isolated outposts and developing systems, then disappearing before substantial forces could respond. "It seems likely," Raleen replied grimly. "They may have been monitoring our communications, waiting for an opportunity. The tension between us and the humans provided the perfect distraction." Another impact rocked the ship. "Aft shields at 30%, reported the defense officer. "They're targeting our propulsion systems." Raleen studied the tactical display. The human fleet was already engaging the attackers, their vessels moving with surprising speed and coordination. But their weapons seemed to be having limited effect against the attackers' shields. "They're outmatched technologically," Mavic observed. "The Meridian ships have better shields and more powerful weapons." A decision crystallized in Raleen's mind. The regulations were clear in first contact situations with isolated worlds. Conquered vessels were forbidden from displaying or sharing advanced technology that might disrupt the natural development of the contacted civilization. But these humans were already spacefaring. They were defending not just themselves but indirectly the conquered ships as well. And they were dying. "Open fire on the Meridian vessels," Raleen ordered. "Full tactical support to the human fleet. Share targeting data and shield analysis." As the Helios Dawn and its companion ships joined the battle, Raleen knew she was crossing a line from which there would be no return. But sometimes, she reflected as energy beams lanced from her ship toward the attackers, rules existed to be broken when the alternative was catastrophe. The battle unfolded with chaotic intensity over the next hour. The Meridian ships, while technologically superior to the human vessels, hadn't anticipated facing the combined firepower of both fleets. 3 of their smaller craft were disabled in the initial exchange, but they regrouped quickly, focusing fire on the largest human capital ships. "Captain Rourke's flagship is taking heavy damage," reported Tactical Officer Varen. "Their shields are failing." Raleen watched as the massive human battleship maneuvered to protect smaller vessels, absorbing punishment that would have destroyed them instantly. It was a sacrificial move, tactically sound, but personally brave. "Move to support position," she ordered. "Divert auxiliary power to forward shields. We'll give them cover." As the Helios Dawn slid between the compromised human flagship and the attacking Meridian cruisers. Raleen opened a direct channel to Rourke. "Captain, I'm coming aboard your vessel. We need to coordinate more effectively, and there are things I can share in person that might help turn this battle." "Commander, that's—" The human hesitated clearly, torn between suspicion and necessity. "Very well. Bay 4 is still operational. But hurry. I don't know how much longer we can hold them off." 20 minutes later, Raleen stood in the command center of the Earth flagship Defiance, surrounded by human officers who regarded her alien presence with a mixture of curiosity and lingering distrust. The ship shuddered continuously under enemy fire, the lighting periodically dimming as power was diverted to critical systems. The Meridian target ships with specific strategic value. Raleen explained, manipulating the holographic display to highlight key tactical patterns. "They're not trying to destroy your fleet. They're trying to capture certain vessels, specifically those with advanced propulsion or weapons technology." Captain Rourke studied the tactical display, her expression grim. "Technology thieves." "Precisely. The Meridian confluence builds their power by assimilating technology from other civilizations. They avoid direct confrontation with the conquered, preferring to target isolated worlds or developing species who possess unique innovations." Raleen's crest flattened against her skull. "They've been monitoring your development, Captain. They see something valuable in your fleet." "Our phase shift drives," said a tall, severe-looking officer at Rourke's side. "We developed them independently after discovering the principles of quantum displacement." Raleen nodded. "Unique configurations often yield breakthroughs that established technological pathways miss. The Conquered has encountered this phenomenon before." Another violent impact rocked the ship more severely than previous hits. "Hull breach on Deck 7, shouted a junior officer. "Emergency containment failing." "They're concentrating fire on our engineering section," Rourke realized. "They want the drive technology intact." "Then, we need to make it too costly for them to continue," Raleen said. She accessed her secure communicator. "Kelly's execute protocol avalanche. Authorization Vos Prime Epsilon." "Commander," came the startled reply of her first officer. "That's a prohibited tactic in a first contact scenario. The prohibition is waived under Statute 15C when Allied forces face imminent destruction," Raleen responded firmly. "Execute now." She turned to Captain Rourke. "You'll want to adjust your sensors to frequency band Delta 9. What you're about to see may be surprising." On the tactical display, the 4 conquered vessels suddenly began emitting unusual energy signatures. Streams of crystalline particles flowed from specialized emitters, forming a glittering web between the ships. "What is that?" Rourke demanded. "Quantum entanglement field," Raleen explained. "When fully formed, it will create a reinforcing resonance that will temporarily enhance your weapon's effectiveness against Meridian shields. But we need your fleet to concentrate fire on these specific points." She highlighted 6 locations on the enemy formation. Rourke didn't hesitate. "All vessels target designated coordinates on my mark. Maximum firepower." What followed was a symphony of destruction. As the quantum field reached full strength, the human fleet fired in perfect coordination. Their weapons, previously struggling to penetrate Meridian defenses, cut through enemy shields like paper. 2 Meridian cruisers exploded in spectacular fireballs. A third spun out of control, its propulsion systems destroyed. The remaining Meridian vessels, clearly shocked by this sudden reversal, began emergency jump preparations. "They're trying to escape," Raleen observed. "Standard Meridian tactic when outmatched: retreat. Analyze return with a counter." "Not this time," Rourke said grimly. She turned to her weapons officer. "Deploy the gravity anchors." From the human fleet, dozens of small devices launched toward the fleeing Meridian ships. Upon reaching proximity, they activated, generating localized gravitational distortions that disrupted the precise calculations needed for faster-than-light travel. Raleen couldn't hide her surprise. "Gravitic interdiction technology. That's impressive. The Conquered only developed similar systems 3 centuries ago." Necessity breeds innovation, Commander, Rourke replied with a tight smile. When you're alone in a hostile universe, you learn to defend yourself effectively. With their escape route blocked, the remaining Meridian vessels found themselves trapped between the coordinated firepower of the Human Concord Alliance. Within another 30 minutes, the battle had ended decisively. 3 Meridian ships were destroyed, 4 disabled and boarded by human marine teams, and the remainder had managed to slip away by overloading their systems to punch through the gravitational net, a desperate measure that would likely leave them stranded, light years from any support. In the sudden quiet that followed the battle, Raleen and Captain Rourke stood side by side on the observation deck of the Defiance, looking out at the aftermath. Scattered debris floated in the void, along with rescue ships retrieving escape pods and salvage teams securing damaged vessels. 27 dead, 53 injured, Rourke said softly. It could have been much worse. Indeed, Raleen agreed. The Meridian are formidable opponents. Few first encounters with them end so favorably. First encounters, Rourke gave a short, humorless laugh. Like the one we should have had with your Concord centuries ago, before you decided we were too dangerous to talk to. The accusation stung, partially, because Raleen recognized its validity. That was a mistake, she admitted. One of many the Concord has made in its long history. And yet you come armed with prohibited tactics and quantum entanglement technology, Rourke observed. You were prepared for conflict despite claiming to be on a humanitarian mission. The universe is a complex place, Captain. The Concord believes in peace, but we're not naive. Their conversation was interrupted by the arrival of Dr. Mahir Keel, who had transferred to the Defiance from the distant Scholar once the battle ended. The historian looked excited, his normally reserved demeanor animated by discovery. Commander Captain, I've finished analyzing the records from Earth's archives that were shared with us. I believe I've located the origin of the signal that brought us here. He activated a portable holoprojector, displaying an ancient image, a primitive satellite with extended solar panels and a large dish antenna. The Voyager Deep Space Communication Array, Keel explained. Launched in the year 2023 by an Earth nation called the United States of America. It was designed as an experiment in long-range communication, broadcasting various messages in the hope of contacting extraterrestrial intelligence. A fishing expedition, Rourke said. Cast a line and see if anything bites. Essentially, yes, Keel agreed. The remarkable thing is that it was designed to operate autonomously for centuries, powered by radioisotope thermoelectric generators, and programmed to maintain its broadcast indefinitely. It's still out there orbiting at the edge of your solar system, faithfully transmitting its message long after those who built it have passed into history. Raleen felt a newfound respect for these humans. Even in their technological infancy, they had built for the ages, reaching out to the stars, with patience and determination. The signal was never meant as a distress call, she said, understanding finally dawning. It was an invitation, a gesture of openness to the universe. And you answered, Rourke said, her tone softening slightly. Just a couple of millennia late. Which raises an important question. Keel interjected, his expression growing serious. Why wasn't Earth contacted after its initial survey? I've reviewed the Concord records, and there was indeed a scheduled follow-up survey 177 years ago that never occurred. The Wars of the Fringe, Raleen said grimly. A period of significant conflict along the Concord's outer territories. Many exploration and survey missions were postponed or canceled as resources were diverted to defensive operations. So we were forgotten, Rourke concluded, left alone because of bureaucratic oversight during a war. It appears so, Raleen admitted. A serious failure on our part. And yet, Keel added thoughtfully, perhaps a fortunate one for humanity. Without external influence, you develop technologies and strategies uniquely your own. Your phase shift drives, gravitational anchors, these are innovations that follow different paths than similar Concord technologies. There's much we could learn from each other. Rourke studied the Avixi commander thoughtfully. Are you proposing some kind of exchange? after nearly shooting each other then fighting side by side. "I'm proposing we correct an ancient mistake," Raleen replied. "The Conquered classified Earth as a death world too dangerous for regular contact. Clearly, that assessment was incorrect. Or rather, it failed to recognize that what makes a world challenging can also make its inhabitants exceptional." The three of them stood in contemplative silence, looking out at Earth. From this distance, the blue-green world seemed peaceful, belying the harsh conditions that had forged humanity into survivors, innovators, warriors. "I will need to report to my superiors," Raleen finally said. "And I suspect you have similar obligations, Captain." "The Earth Defense Council will want a full debriefing," Rourke confirmed. "This changes everything." "Indeed it does," Raleen agreed. "Perhaps we should give them something concrete to consider. A formal proposal for continued cooperation and cultural exchange." "You're full of surprises, Commander. First, you bring a humanitarian mission to answer a non-existent distress call. Then you break your own regulations to help us fight off raiders. And now, you're proposing an alliance." "Not an alliance. Not yet." Raleen's crest rose slightly, an expression of cautious optimism among her kind. "But a beginning. The signal that brought us here was a question asked 2,000 years ago. Is anyone out there? We have finally answered. Now we must decide what happens next." The days following the battle were filled with intensive diplomatic activity. The initial mistrust between humans and the Concord representatives gradually gave way to cautious cooperation. Medical teams from the Mercy's Hand assisted with treating injured human personnel, while Earth engineers helped repair damage to the Helios Dawn's propulsion systems. Dr. Meher Keel and his research team were granted limited access to Earth's historical archives, where they began piecing together the remarkable story of human development since the cursory Concord survey centuries earlier. What they discovered both impressed and disturbed them. They nearly destroyed themselves. Several times, Keel reported during a private briefing with Raleen. Nuclear conflicts, environmental collapse, biological warfare, they brought themselves to the brink of extinction repeatedly. And yet they survived, Raleen observed. More than survived. They adapted. Each crisis forced technological and social evolution at an accelerated pace. Keel's expression was one of professional admiration. Their transition from a pre-spaceflight civilization to an interplanetary society with limited FTL capability occurred in less than 2 centuries. That's unprecedented in Concord records. It also explains their defensive posture, Raleen noted. A species that has repeatedly faced extinction develops strong survival instincts. Indeed. And without the moderating influence of contact with other spacefaring civilizations, they developed along more militaristic lines than most Concord members. Keel hesitated, then continued. "But there's something else, Commander. Something remarkable about their physiological adaptability." He displayed medical scans comparing human biological responses to those of various Concord species. Humans evolved on a high-gravity world with extreme temperature variations, atmospheric toxins, and dangerous predators. Their bodies show adaptations for survival that exceed normal parameters for sentient species. They're stronger, more durable, and more environmentally adaptable than they have any right to be. "A consequence of evolving on a death world," Raleen said. "Yes, but more than that." Keel highlighted specific data points. Their neural structure shows unusual plasticity. They form new connections and adapt to new situations with remarkable speed. And their aggression response, while concerning in some contexts, gives them tactical advantages in crisis situations. They react faster, more decisively, and with greater commitment than most conquered species. Raleen considered this information thoughtfully. "You're suggesting that what the original survey identified as dangerous traits might actually be valuable ones." "In the right context, yes," Keel confirmed. "The Conquered has always valued diversity of thought and approach. Humans represent something different, a species forged by adversity rather than nurtured by stability. These insights informed Ralene's approach to the delicate negotiations that followed. Rather than attempting to impose Concord standards and expectations on humanity, she advocated for a more customized integration path, one that acknowledged both human potential and human differences. On the seventh day after the battle, representatives from Earth's unified government met with the Concord delegation aboard a neutral station in Earth orbit. Captain Rourke was present as military liaison, while Ralene represented the Concord's diplomatic interests. "We have reviewed your proposal for cultural exchange," stated Chairperson Varsha Patel, the elected leader of Earth's governing council. "While we appreciate the gesture, we have concerns about the classification status you've suggested." Ralene maintained a composed demeanor. "Please elaborate, Chairperson." "You propose to reclassify Earth from Deathworld Restricted Contact to Developing Civilization Limited Integration," Patel said, consulting her notes. "This classification still imposes significant restrictions on human access to Concord technologies and territories." "Standard protocol for newly contacted civilizations," Ralene explained. "It's designed to prevent cultural disruption and technological dependency." Captain Rourke leaned forward. "With respect, Commander, we're not a newly contacted civilization in the traditional sense. We've developed interplanetary infrastructure and limited FTL capability independently. We've fought and defeated Meridian raiders that even your Concord considers serious threats. We don't need technological hand-holding." "And," added another counselor, "we've already been denied 2,000 years of potential cooperation because your organization decided our planet was too dangerous to bother with, then forgot about us entirely during a border skirmish." The accusation hung in the air, uncomfortable, but undeniably true. Ralene felt the weight of centuries of Concord policy pressing down on her policies she had always followed without question. Until now. "You're right," she said finally. The human delegates exchanged surprised glances. "The standard classification system is inappropriate for Earth's unique situation," Ralene continued. "You've developed independently facing challenges that would have broken many established Concord worlds. You've created technologies following different evolutionary paths than our own. And you've demonstrated both the military capability to defend yourselves and the ethical restraint to use that capability responsibly." She accessed her data terminal, making real-time modifications to the proposal document. "I am recommending a new classification, Special Autonomous Ally. This would acknowledge Earth's independent development while establishing formal diplomatic and trade relations. No restrictions on human movement within Concord space, beyond standard security protocols that apply to all members. Technology exchange would be reciprocal rather than unidirectional, with joint research initiatives benefiting both parties." The human delegates leaned together, conferring in hushed tones. Chairperson Patel eventually straightened her expression, cautiously optimistic. "This is a significant improvement, Commander. Though I must ask, do you have the authority to make such an offer?" It was a fair question. Ralene was stretching her diplomatic mandate to its breaking point, and possibly beyond. "I have provisional authority to establish preliminary agreements," she replied carefully. "Final ratification would require approval from the Concord High Council. But my recommendation carries significant weight, especially in unique first contact scenarios." Captain Rourke studied her with newfound respect. "You're going out on a limb for us, Commander. Why?" Ralene considered the question. The truth was, her perspective had shifted fundamentally since arriving in this system. What had begun as a routine humanitarian mission had become something far more profound, a reassessment of Concord principles and her own understanding of what truly mattered in galactic civilization. "Because sometimes," she said finally, "rules exist to serve greater principles." The Concord was founded on ideals of mutual respect, diversity, and cooperation. If our classification systems and contact protocols prevent us from honoring those ideals, then the systems, not the ideals, must change. The formal agreement was signed the following day. As a gesture of good faith, The human government provided the conquered delegation with complete technical specifications for their phase shift drive system and gravitational anchor technology. In return, Raleen authorized the sharing of Concord medical technology and agricultural terraforming techniques that would significantly improve living conditions in Earth's more challenging environments. 2 weeks after the initial contact, the Concord vessels prepared to depart. They would return to Concord Central, with news that would undoubtedly create significant political and cultural ripples throughout the alliance. The discovery of a thriving, technologically advanced human civilization, one that had been overlooked and forgotten, would force a re-evaluation of exploration and contact protocols that had remained unchanged for centuries. Before leaving, Raleen made a final visit to Earth's surface. Captain Rourke accompanied her to a historical preservation site, the launch facility from which the Voyager Deep Space Communication Array had been deployed nearly 2 millennia earlier. The ancient complex had been maintained as a museum, a monument to humanity's early reach toward the stars. They stood before a replica of the original satellite, its solar arrays extending like metallic wings, its communication dish pointed eternally outward. "It's still out there," Rourke said. "Still broadcasting after all this time." "A testament to human engineering," Raleen observed, "and human hope. Do you think we should deactivate it now that it's served its purpose?" Raleen considered the question. "No," she said finally. "Let it continue its mission, not as a distress call or even an invitation, but as a reminder." "Of what?" "That sometimes the most important messages take centuries to be heard, and that mistakes, even ancient ones, can eventually lead to understanding." They walked together through the museum, examining artifacts from humanity's early space exploration efforts. Primitive spacesuits, chemical rockets, hand-drawn calculations, the humble beginnings of a species that now commanded formidable starships. "Your people achieved so much in isolation," Raleen said. "One can only imagine what you'll accomplish as part of the wider galactic community." "Are you sure your Concord is ready for us?" Rourke asked, only half joking. "We can be challenging." "That's precisely why the Concord needs humanity," Raleen replied. "We've grown comfortable in some ways, predictable. Your different perspective, your unique approaches to problems, these will invigorate the alliance." As they completed their tour and prepared to return to orbit, Raleen paused at the museum's exit. A large inscription was carved into the stone above the doorway, "Ad astra per aspera." "What does it mean?" she asked. "An ancient saying in one of our dead languages," Rourke explained. "To the stars through hardship." It was a motto from our early space programs. "Fitting," Raleen observed. "Your people have certainly faced their share of hardships." "It's made us who we are," Rourke said simply. Hours later, as the Concord vessels activated their gravity-fold engines and prepared to depart the Sol system, Raleen stood once more in the observation dome of the Helios Dawn. Earth receded in the distance, a blue jewel wrapped in the glittering lights of its orbital infrastructure. Several human vessels had formed an honor escort, accompanying the Concord ships to the system's edge. First Officer Kellis joined her, observing the departure preparations. "The final report, Commander," he said, offering a data crystal. "Ready for submission to Concord Central." Raleen accepted it, turning it thoughtfully in her scaled fingers. "Did you include my personal addendum?" "Yes, Commander. Though if I may speak freely, it's rather unorthodox." "These are unorthodox circumstances, Kellis." She inserted the crystal into a reader displaying the report's conclusion, her own words. "In evaluating the contact with Earth and its human inhabitants, one must acknowledge a fundamental error in Concord policy. What we designated a death world was in fact a crucible that forged a uniquely resilient, innovative, and determined species. The very conditions we deemed too harsh became the driving force behind human advancement. We came to save them from a mistaken signal, but they saved us from ourselves, from our complacency, our rigid adherence to outdated protocols, our failure to recognize that diversity includes not just appearance and culture, but the very paths by which sentient beings reach for the stars." I therefore recommend not only formal alliance with Earth, but a complete reassessment of our contact protocols regarding worlds previously classified as unsuitable or hazardous. We may find that the greatest allies emerge not from gentle garden worlds, but from the challenging environments that demand adaptation, innovation, and unrelenting determination to survive. The signal that brought us to Sol was not a mistake after all, but a reminder that sometimes the most valuable connections arise from the most unexpected beginnings. Kellis was silent for a moment after reading. This will cause quite a stir at Central. Good, Raline said, her crest rising with determination. It should. As the stars began to streak past the viewports, Earth vanishing in the distortion of faster-than-light travel, Raline thought about the ancient satellite still orbiting at the edge of the solar system, still broadcasting its message into the void. Not a cry for help, but a statement of existence. A declaration that even in a universe of unimaginable vastness, intelligence had arisen on a small blue world and had something to say. Some messages were worth waiting millennia to hear.